and write poetry because we are members of the human race, and the human race is filled with passion. Medicine, law, business, engineering, these are noble pursuits and necessary to sustain life. But poetry, beauty, romance, love, these are what we stay alive for.
Hello everyone! For this activity, I will be discussing the film Dead Poet Society and analyzing one of its key characters through the lens of confessional poetry. This video will focus on how the characters' experiences, emotions, and inner struggles reflect the core ideas of the poetic tradition, particularly in terms of self-expression and emotional conflict. Through selected scenes and a related poetic excerpt, I am to show how literature and film can work together to deepen our understanding of a character's psychological journey. One character that really stood out to me in the film was Neil Perry. His character in Dead Poet Society can be understood through the lens of confessional poetry, a tradition that emphasizes raw, personal expressions of inner struggles and emotional pain. Confessional poetry focuses on the poet's private experiences, feelings, and identity conflicts, often revealing psychological tension, guilt, or trauma that is usually hidden from the outside world. Similarly, Neil's life is filled with intense, unspoken emotions. He passionately loves acting and finds joy and purpose on stage, but his strict father forbids him from pursuing his dreams, forcing him to hide his true self. This suppression of his desires create deep internal conflict, anxiety, and guilt, much like the themes explored in confessional poems. Neil's secret pursuit of acting can be seen as a form of emotional confession, a way for his authentic self to emerge despite social and familial constraints. His journey illustrates the painful tension between personal fulfillment and external expectations, showing how unexpressed desires and emotional repression can dominate a person's inner life. In this way, Neil's story becomes a living example of confessional poetry, reflecting the honest confrontation with one's emotions, identity, and suffering that defines the tradition. Neil Perry's story is a powerful example of how social pressures and lack of emotional support can shape a person's psychological development, as explained by Karen Horney's psychoanalytic social theory. According to Horney, two key cornerstones are essential for healthy emotional growth: safety, which means feeling secure and free from excessive control, and satisfaction, which refers to the ability to pursue personal desires and feel fulfilled. In Neil's case, both are missing. His father imposes strict rules and high expectations, controlling every part of Neil's life, from his studies to his career path. This denies Neil a sense of safety because he cannot act freely without fear of punishment, and a sense of satisfaction because he is unable to follow his passion for acting, something that brings him joy and purpose. As a result, Neil develops basic hostility, a natural frustration or resentment toward his father, and the force that blocks his personal growth. However, this hostility cannot be expressed outwardly. He fears disappointing his father and being punished, so his frustration turns inward. This inward turn manifests as basic anxiety, a deep sense of fear, insecurity, and inner tension. Neil's anxiety grows as he struggles to balance his desire to express himself fully with the impossible expectation placed upon him. The conflict between his inner needs and external demands becomes unbearable, leading him to take tragic action. Neil's journey illustrates Horney's core insight. When children or adolescents are denied safety and satisfaction, and when their frustration or basic hostility cannot be resolved or expressed, it produces basic anxiety that can dominate thoughts, feelings, and behavior. His story is a vivid example of how emotional repression, social pressures, and lack of supportive relationship can profoundly affect mental and emotional well-being, ultimately shaping the choices a person feel they can make about their own life. To understand it better, Let's answer this question. First, how Neil reflects or conflicts with the poetic tradition. Neil Perry embodies confessional poetry because his life is full of intense, private emotions and personal struggles similar to a confessional poet revealing inner truths. He loves acting and feels alive on stage, but his father forbids him from pursuing this passion. This tension between his inner desires and external control shows how he both reflects and struggles against the tradition. Second, what this reveals about his thoughts, feelings, and mental states. Neil's conflict reveals that he experienced deep anxiety, frustration, and emotional repression. He feels trapped between expressing his true self and obeying his father, which causes internal tension and guilt. Psychologically, his thoughts are dominated by fear of disappointing his father and longing for personal freedom. Next, what drives his action or his motivation? Neil is motivated by a strong desire for self-expression and fulfillment. He secretly participates in theater and works hard to perform, trying to follow his passion despite the risk. His actions reflect his need to assert his identity and live authentically even if only temporarily. And lastly, how this contributes to his ultimate fate. Because Neil cannot reconcile his dream with his father's strict expectations, the pressure and unexpressed emotions build until they overwhelm him. This leads to his tragic fate, showing how emotional repression and conflict between personal desire and external control can have devastating consequences. His life mirrors the confessional poet's exploration of inner struggle, identity, and the consequences of suppressed feelings.
It's good. It was really good.
That scene from Dead Poets Society captures Neil Perry at the height of his emotional and psychological awakening. His last line, "I was good, I was really good," reveals a rare moment of pride and self-recognition aligning with the essence of confessional expressions, honest, vulnerable, and deeply personal. Psychologically, it highlights Neil's strong desire for autonomy, validation, and the freedom to define himself beyond the rigid expectation imposed on him. These moments stand as the peak of his personal fulfillment, where he feels most alive and authentic, in stark contrast to the repression he experienced in his everyday life. The scene also connects to a Midsummer Night's Dream by William Shakespeare. It's centered on themes of self-discovery, imagination, and defiance of societal constraint, much like the characters in Shakespeare's work. Neil briefly escapes reality and embraces his true identity through performance. The joy and freedom he experienced on stage mirror Shakespearean ideas of self-expression, while the contrast between illusion and reality reflects Neil's inner conflict between who he is and who he is expected to be.
Opportunities that I never even dreamt of, and I am not going to let you. I've got to tell you what I feel.
I'm so worried.
What? Tell me what you feel. What is it?
In Dead Poets Society, that moment exposes the darker dimensions of Neil Perry's emotional and psychological state. His response reveals deep internalized fear and repression, aligning with the core of confessional poetry, which centers on hidden and unspoken emotions. Instead of asserting his true desires, Neil suppresses them to satisfy his father's expectations. From a psychological perspective, this reflects basic anxiety and the painful tension between his authentic self and the identity imposed upon him. This prolonged emotional repression foreshadows his tragic fate, demonstrating how the denial of one's identity can escalate into devastating consequences. This inner conflict closely mirrors themes from Hamlet by William Shakespeare, particularly the line, "I must be cruel only to be kind," which captures profound moral struggle and emotional turmoil. Like Hamlet, Neil is torn between duty and personal desire, unable to reconcile his internal truth with external expectations. Shakespeare frequently portrays how suppressed emotions and rigid social pressures culminate in tragedy, directly paralleling Neil's outcome. In conclusion, Take Dead Poets Society shows how powerful self-expression can be, but also the consequences when it is suppressed. Through Neil Perry's character and the lens of confessional poetry, we see how unspoken emotions and inner struggles can deeply affect a person's choices and fate. This reminds us of the importance of understanding and expressing our true selves.